Welcome, Nivedita, and thank you so much for doing this session for our students and all of us here. We're really excited about it. Fellows, just to give you all a background about Nivedita. Nivedita is one of those people who is very passionate about Chennai and Madras, right? She's become very popular in doing um, her walks around Chennai, doing storytellings, talking about different anecdotes, which have become really popular even outside of Chennai. She has authored a book called Uthal Pengal. Okay, it's on pioneering women of the Madras presidency. She's also been the co-author of a couple of books, and they're all on archaeology, which one is on Indus Valley civilization, and the other one is on the Kiladi excavations. And now Nandita is going to talk to us about some interesting facts about Chennai, Madras, as most people from Madras like to call it, and the legal history that it has to offer. So over to you, Nivedita. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Good evening to you all. Uh, I don't want this session to be a very formal session. It will be good if you can interact with me. I'm not able to see anybody else other than me on video. Anyone there?
Yes, ma'am, you're right here.
Yes, ma'am.
There are some voices. Thank you. Right. So, I am someone who loves to talk more about the city because I love the city so much. So before I start, I should at the outset thank Nandita for giving me this wonderful opportunity to be here, to interact with all of you. So I think we'll go straight to the session. So what is your idea about this city? Can anyone tell me how old this city is? Anyone?
I think more than 350 years.
I think some around 300 years.
300 years? 350 years? Anyone else? I want some more answers.
If I can gauge it from how old the language Tamil is, I guess it will go thousands of years. Maybe the name would have been different, but the settlement would have been there for more than 300 or 400 or 500 years for sure. I can't say, but it's quite ancient. If I would like to take a guess,
I think the city of Madras was, I think, founded around, which is, I think, at the fort, which is around 380 years old now, because I think 2019 they celebrated something for it.
Okay. So 380 years.
381 years. We celebrated the Madras Day thing here on Daksha, and there were discussions based on that. So
yes, so that's 381 years. Okay, but then do you know how long the city has been a habitation site? How long people have lived in this city?
If you're talking about from the archaeological perspective, it should be dating more than 2,500 or 3,000 years.
3,000 years. Okay, not a bad guess. Any other guesses? Anyone?
Yeah, thousands of years.
Thousands of years. Okay. So what if I say this city has been a continuous habitation site for at least 2,000 years, and this is having the earliest evidence of Homo sapiens inhabiting this land about 1.5 million years. So that exactly is the age of the city. Can we go to the first slide? Yeah, what you're seeing on your screens are two stone hand axes which were recovered from a site called Pallavaram, which is near Madras. Most of the people who live down south, like to the south of the city, will definitely know this place, Pallavaram. This is where this is very close to the airport. And in the year 1863, there was this guy called Robert Bruce Foote who excavated these two hand tools while he was walking over the parade grounds in Pallavaram. He excavated these two small stones and he found them to be stone axes, handmade, fine chiseled hand axes. And the approximate age of these two stones has been fixed around 1.5 million years. Bruce Foote, he didn't stop there. He identified Pallavaram as a very potential site. He found that it was on the basin of Kortalayar River. So from the river basin, he walked upwards with his trusted friend, Colonel King, and both these men walked all the way up to a place called Gudiyam. The place is very popular now. We call them the Gudiyam Caves, which is called the Madras Stone Hand Axe Tool Factory. And there, the excavations are still continuing. About 3.5 million years is the age of that particular habitation site. And most of the archaeologists believe that the early Homo sapiens, that is the prototype of the Homo sapiens, probably a kind of Homo erectus, lived in this place called Atrampakam. And so we can safely say that this city has been as a habitation site for the Homo sapiens about 1.5 million years ago. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so this is Robert Bruce Foote, the man who identified the Pallavaram hand axes, who has put Madras on the archaeological map. And now we say that the city is 1.5 million years old thanks to this guy. Next picture, please. This is one professor, Dr. Gift Siromoney. Siromoney worked in Madras Christian College, and he identified this stone monument. We call them the stone dolmens. He found this site at a place called Guduvancheri. Most of the people who live in Chennai would definitely know this place also. It's at the outskirts of the city. So these stone dolmens are supposed to be belonging to the period, probably the megalithic age, and so safely we can fix the archaeological dating of this site probably to 2500 years. Next slide, please. And these are cane circles. The archaeologists call them the cane circles because they place the stones as circles to identify a burial site. And this cane circle is in a place called Tiruporur, again in the suburb of Madras. This also dates back to 2000 years ago. Next picture, please. This is sarcophagus which was excavated in Kilpauk. How many of you have heard about the place called Kilpauk in Chennai? Anyone heard about Kilpauk?
No. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, great, thank you. So Kilpauk is probably in the heart of the city now, and this sarcophagus, which has been dated to about 2000 years ago, has been unearthed bang at the middle of the city, Kilpauk. This excavation had happened in the year 1930s in a bungalow called the Fontenay in Kilpauk, 2000 years ago. This sarcophagus. The next picture, please. These two are the burial urns that have been excavated from Kilpauk. Again, the same period, 2000 years. Both these urns are on display at the Madras Museum, Government Museum. Next picture, please.
If I may ask, what's sarcophagus?
Sarcophagus is what we call a terracotta container in which human burials have been done.
All right, thank you.
Welcome. So this picture, how many of you know about this place? Heard about this place?
Yes.
Mahabalipuram? Yes, good.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So this
temple, right? The shore temple.
The shore temple, beautiful. This is a wonderful temple. This again dates to the 7th century. This was built by Narasimhavarma Pallava. Most of the temples in and around Mahabalipuram have been built by Narasimhavarma, or we call him the Mallan, the great king. These all have been dated to 7th century. And the next picture, please. Yes, this is a small terracotta figurine which has been excavated from a place called Chetpet, and this belongs to 8th century. This terracotta object is right now at Victoria Museum, and Chetpet is probably the place which is next to Ennore. Again, this is bang in the middle of the city. 8th century is this date. Next picture, please. And these are the Pandya coins, copper coins, which were excavated in Mambalam. No one would believe that Mambalam was once a habitation site. It was a beautiful port. This is part of the beautiful port town, which is called Mylapore. 8th century to 10th century BC, AD is the date that is fixed for these coins. And these belong to the Pandya kings. We call them the Kasharpanas. Next picture, please. Yeah, and there is this wonderful mention of Mylapore, which is a part of Madras. This has been done in a Portuguese epic called Os Lusiadas in the year 1572. If you can look at your screens and read it, you can read here once a city stood called Mylapore, for splendor and for opulence renowned, base idols anciently were there adored, and such the natives even in those days still venerate. So this typically speaks about Mylapore, a Portuguese epic that talks about a locality of Madras, 1572. This was written by Louis de Camus. This narrates actually the trip of Vasco da Gama to India, and in this poem he has mentioned about Mylapore. Next, please. And Madras has been a habitation site right from over 2000 years ago. Most of the temples that we find in and around Madras, be it the Tiruvattiur temple or the Coimbatore temple or the Mylapore temple or the Punamalli temple, almost all these temples have been there, have had their influences of the Chola period, the Pallava period, the Cheras, the Pandyas. Almost all these southern kings, they have had their share of Madras right from about 2000 years ago, that is the Sangham age. And we see that there have been a couple of forts that were built probably in the medieval period. The 16th century, we have this Portuguese fort of Santhome. What you're seeing on your screens is the Portuguese fort of Santhome. The Portuguese, they came and settled in a place called Santhome or Toma because they had a lot of love for Saint Thomas, and they believed that the Roman Catholic Saint Thomas was martyred in Madras. Again, that's a myth. We don't have enough historical evidences to prove that Saint Thomas was killed in Santhome. But still, the Portuguese, the Armenians, and the Jews believed that Saint Thomas was martyred in Saint Thomas Mount, which is you can find a small mount which is in the in the middle of the city, and Saint Thomas Mount Church. The church has been mentioned a lot in most of the Anglo-Saxon chronicles dating to 9th century AD. And there have been a lot of travelers who have come to Madras who have repeatedly written about the church. Can you go to the next picture? Yeah, this is the church atop St. Thomas Mount, and this structure, the basic structure, is said to have been built by the Portuguese, even though there were remnants of an old stone chapel, the parts of which we can still find in Santhome Church. This church was supposed to be visited by Marco Polo in 13th century. There have been other travelers like the Italian traveler Niccolo Conti, who came here in 15th century, and Duarte Barbosa in 16th century, and most of them have recorded that this church was intact and it was very popular during those days. And the British, they were the people who came and gave this name, the Chennai. The British record that this town was a fishing hamlet with lot of huts. That is what you find basically in the Firman or the initial agreement that was signed between the British East India Company and the Golconda vassals. There is another interesting 13th century inscription. Can you go to the next picture, please? Yeah. Yes, what you see here is a small hillock. This is a place called Penneswaramadam, which is near Tiruvannamalai. And this inscription in particular mentions about a king called Kampanna Udayar. And interestingly, this inscription mentions the name Madrasan Pattanam or Madrasan Pattanam. It mentions a lot of ports along the east coast, starting from Nilangarayan Pattanam, Madrasan Pattanam, Pudu Pattanam, Esana Pattanam. And these ports were those ports from which exports were made during those days, the 13th century. And tax was collected for the goods that was exported from these places. Next picture, please. This is a part of that inscription which mentions Madrasan Pattanam. So the name Madrasan Pattanam or Madrasan Pattanam was probably, it was a well-known name right from 13th century. It was not something the Britishers gave us. Madras was the name that the Britishers chose to use. Chennai also was the name that the Britishers themselves chose to use. Next picture, please. Yeah, and Britishers, when the British East India Company, they wanted to set up a trading post on India's east coast because they wanted to trade with our cotton, the spices. they wanted to set up a small factory basically. And the place that they initially chose was somewhere north of Puliket, because they knew that Puliket was a strong Dutch hold, and they wanted to find a place which was safe from the Dutch and the Portuguese people as well. And so they chose a place called Armagaon, which was to the north of Puliket, and to the south of a place called Durgarayapatnam. But they could not find a safe place to anchor their ships there. The sea at that place was very strong, and there were a lot of shoals. They were not able to berth their ships. And so they looked for some alternative places. And it so happened that the agents of East India Company, Andrew Cogan and Francis Day, they wanted to set up the factory at a small place called Narimed, Hog Hill, we call it in English, and they wanted to trade from that place. So they contacted the local Golconda vassal by name Damarla Venkatadri Nayak, and Venkatadri Nayak was very happy to lease out a piece of land that belonged to the Golconda king, and they signed a treaty on August 22, 1639. Based on that treaty, we celebrate Madras Day every year on August 22. And when this treaty was signed, the vassals of the Golconda kings, Damarla Venkatadri Nayak, wanted to give this land on lease to the British East India Company for a period of only 2 years. And the Britishers, once they gained access to the Indian territory, they held on to this for more than, for 300 years as their own. They owned the land, they owned the people, they owned the judiciary, they owned practically everything that they could lay their hands on. And Damarla Venkatadri Nayak had only one condition. He wanted to name the city that the Britishers were going to build on his father, Chennappa Nayak. And that is why Chennai, the name Madras and the name Chennai have been parallelly used across the time period. And the factory site which the East India Company initially set up was between river Elambur. The river is now extinct. We call it the northern branch of Cooum. What you're seeing on your screens is the Cooum River in the 1960s. Most of you would have seen this river as a piece of garbage or filth now, but this was how the river looked in the 1960s, with people boating. There were long 100 feet long boats that were plying on this river once. It was very much pliable. Next picture, please. Yeah, this is the beautiful Madras Central Station, and here you see the Cooum with a few boats berthed there. Next picture, please. Yes, and this is the Buckingham Canal, which is now a filthy drainage sewage canal. And here you can see the boats. There were a lot of boats that were coming all the way from Andhra, carrying tobacco from Andhra and taking back rice and betel leaves from Tamil Nadu to Andhra. Then we all, we called it the Madras Presidency. So once upon a time, when the Britishers came here, this was actually a beautiful, you call a water canal city. There were a lot of waterways in and around the city. Probably some people are right when they called it Madras once looked like the Venice of the East. A lot of waterways crisscrossing, the Buckingham Canal, the Cochrane Canal, the Cooum River, the Elambur River, the Adayar River. So the Britishers got a piece of land between Elambur River and Triplicane River. Triplicane River is now what we call the western branch of Cooum. So in between the northern part of Cooum and the western part of Cooum, they got a small piece of land, and that is where they planned to build their factory. It was a small island practically between these two rivers. And the leased land lay 3/4 of a mile south of a village called Madrasan Pattinam. That is where the Britishers first mentioned the name Madrasan Pattinam. So where probably right now we have the High Court is the place where Madrasan Pattinam once was. So the High Court right now stands at a place where the Britishers called the Black Town, where they themselves called it the Madrasan Pattinam, was very much alive and active as a fishing hamlet during the 17th century. And they wanted to erect a fort in or about this Madrasan Pattinam, and they were given a right to collect RAN revenue for 2 years and pay half of it to the Golconda vassals. And the area was called Narimedu or Hogkill. So this is where the entire history of the city, the modern city Madras started. Next picture, please. So this you see is a beautiful picture of Fort St. George, which the Britishers built. The fort was completed in 1644 by the East India Company, and the East India Company had full control over the fort, and this was called White Town probably because the Britishers and the other Europeans, including the Portuguese and the Armenians and the Jews, lived. So they called this the White Town. And the part where the black people lived or the natives lived, they called it the Black Town. There were two parts of Black Town. One was the old Black Town, which is where now the High Court stands, and the new Black Town, which is now we call the Paris Corner or the Georgetown area. And there was this charter of Queen Elizabeth, which was drawn on 16 December 1600, which gave exclusive right of trading in East Indies to the East India Company for 15 years. And it gave power to the company to make its law for its own government. So I think nowhere in the history can we find a separate, privately held limited company having unimaginable powers to rule over a piece of land. And the Charter of Elizabeth gave the Britishers or the East India Company to rule over Indian territory. And there was a charter by King James I which extended this period. And finally, the charter which was signed on 3rd April 1661 by Charles II, it gave power to make laws as per the English law, appoint governors and other officials, council of a place to judge all the persons living under them in all causes, civil or criminal. So apparently they gave a free rein to the East India Company to rule over the East Indies, and that is how Madras came under the legal and jurisdictional powers of the British East India Company, not the Crown but the East India Company. Next picture. Yeah, that's Queen Elizabeth I who gave full control to the East India Company. Next picture. Charles II, he gave the British the power, the East India Company, the power to judge all the civilians irrespective of their country. You know, that brought the Indians also under the ambit of the British law. And in 1683, Charles II gave another charter which permitted establishment in any factory of a court of judicature. He gave permission to start a court of judicature which had 2 merchants, and there was one person who was well versed in civil laws. And they also set up primarily a court of admiralty. He gave permission to set up a court of admiralty. And how did the Indians just gave away their right to be ruled, the right to pass laws over them, the right to rule over them? Probably it was again a mistake that was committed by the Nayaks or the local vassals of Golconda kings. We all know that Golconda kings were ruling over Madras through their vassals. And in 1641, there's a very interesting murder. A native woman was murdered and she was thrown into the Cooum river by a native man. The local Nayak was informed immediately that a woman was murdered and her corpse was found in the river. And the Nayak apparently, for some reason, he said that he wanted justice to be delivered as per English law. Now that the Britishers had a control, or the East India Company had a control over the city, he said that they had to look for this criminal and punish the criminal. Apparently the criminal was hanged. And just because this one local Nayak gave permission to the Britishers to punish a person as per their law, it continued. In the year 1642, the very next year, there was one British soldier who was killed by a person called Antonio Mirando, who was a Portuguese. And the court was unwilling to deal with another European subject. And so in this case, it was the Nayak who insisted the immediate execution of the Portuguese fellow. He was shot dead as per the rule of this Nayak. And slowly, the Britishers, there was another case in the year 1644, if I remember right, and there was a case called Sergeant Bradford. Bradford inadvertently, you should note the word, the usage of the words that the Britishers do, it's so beautiful to see these kind of words that they use. Inadvertently caused the death of a native. Because it is a native, the death was inadvertently caused, and the case was referred to the principal inhabitants, apparently to the East India Council Company's agent. And under the native law, this was held to be an accidental death. So, like a native woman who is murdered by a native man, it is it is a murder. And when it is a foreigner who is killing an Indian native, it is inadvertent death, and it's not, it's not a murder. It was just taken as an accidental death. So the offences by British subjects, as we see, they were not involving the Indians. They were being dealt with by the agent in council, and the Indian inhabitants. Most of the cases, the petty cases and the small cause cases, whatever was happening with the locals or the native inhabitants, it was taken care of by a person called the Adhikari in Tamil, Hindi also Adhikari, which means the governor of the town, who was sitting in the Choultries or the town house. Next picture, please. This is a Choultry. I could find an illustration of a Choultry in Srirangam. This was an illustration drawn in the year 1773. So this is probably what the town halls those days looked like. They were basically places where the travelers came and they rested, and those were also the town halls where the Choultry Courts were held then. So the Adhikari used to come to this Choultry Court every day, and he used to pass judgments over the local petty cases that were brought to his notice. So the first such recorded Adhikari of Madras was a person by name Kannappa. Kannappa was a Brahmin man. In 1644, there are, you can find references to him sitting over the cases, the small petty cases that were happening in Madras. And before him, there's also a reference that his father, who was also a Brahmin, he was in charge of these petty cases. So it so happened that President Baker, when he was made East India Company's president here in Madras, he ousted Kannappa, and he made two Britishers, one Captain Martin and another Captain Lay, to sit at court in alternative weeks. So one Indian is there, he is a Brahmin, and this practice of bringing the Brahmins as Adhikaris, this is a long tradition. You can find this tradition right from the Chola period, or probably from the Kalabras even from the 4th or 5th century AD. There was this practice that the Tamils usually had, that the Brahmins, there were Brahmins who were well versed in the Vedas. Anyone who was well versed in the 2 Vedas, the Trivedis, 3 Vedas, the Trivedis, the 4 Vedas, the Chaturvedis, and the Chaturvedi Brahmins were held in great regard by the kings of Tamil Nadu, especially the Cholas, and a lot of lands were given away to these Chaturvedis, or the Brahmins who knew all the 4 Vedas, because the kings believed that these Brahmins who knew all the 4 Vedas were the people who were fit to sit on judgment over the others. They were the judges whom the kings themselves gave them powers to rule over the other people. And so the same tradition continued over a period of time. In the medieval period, again, there was a lot of problems then. But then later on, when the British came in, they legalized this kind of Brahmin sitting over judgment on the locals. And finally, when they found that their powers were being infringed upon by the locals or the natives, they decided to send these people away, and they appointed their own British people or their own East India Company men to sit on judgment over the locals. And Sir Edward Winter, when he became the East India Company's president in Madras, agent, in 1661, showing the 1661 charter that Charles II gave, he appointed 2 Indians by name Veeranna and Timmanna as Adhikars or Adhikaris. And after that, immediately, there was another person, Foxcroft, who stood these 2 Indian men, and he appointed another person called William Davis. And this William Davis was one person. There was another very interesting case in the year 1665, which we can say paved the way for the Britishers to set up a proper legal framework in the city. This case is called the Rex versus Davis case. There was a violent death of a slave girl. Can you go to the next picture? Sorry. This is Choultry, 1786. This we call the Ennore Choultry. Ennore is a place which is to the north of Madras. So this is also another illustration how the Choultry should have probably looked. Next picture, please. Yeah. Right. So we are now talking about a very important case, the Rex versus Davis case. There was a violent death of a slave girl, and the accused person was Mrs. Ascensia Davis. The Ascensia Davis is the woman who is again the wife of William Davis, who is appointed by Foxcroft as the local Adhikar or the Adhikari of the Choultry Court. And here in this case, the agent writes to the head office and says that she was tried under the charter of 1661. They had a jury, and the jury had 6 English people and 6 Portuguese people. And they gave the agency to decide on this case by a foreman called Reed. and read. He gave an unanimous verdict by the juries that this woman was not guilty and she was acquitted. Even though it was a cold-blooded murder, Accentia Davies got away with it easily because of this jury. And there was this problem with this jury, and so this letter was sent on April 15, 1669 by the governor and the council from Fort St. George to the Honorable Company, where they find themselves at a loss in several things. Can you go to the next picture, please? Yeah, so this is OC, Office Charter number 3171, 15th April 1669, where you see the last few lines. They say that we proceeded in those and other particulars according to the best of our judgments, but if any like case shall occur, we shall need the direction and assistance of a person better skilled in the law on formalities of it than any of your servants here are. So probably they're looking for, or they're seeking for, proper judicial help from the company because they were not happy with this verdict in this Rex versus Davies case. And immediately Governor Foxcroft appoints 2 judges to the Choultry. One by name Thomas Clarks and the other by name Nathaniel Foxcroft, and then there are 2 more judges who are coming in, and the Choultry Court then finally decides that they need to have 3 justices and not less than 2 to sit for trials and also for registration of land. And again there's another trouble brewing here. We have Nawab Neknam Khan. Nawab Neknam Khan was the Prince of Arcot, and the Prince of Arcot is again asking for, he's sending across a request to the East India Company saying that he wants to appoint a Havildar or an Alvidor or a governor to rule over or to pass judgments over the people, which is refused flat by Foxcroft. Next picture, please. Okay, so Foxcroft refuses the request of Nawab Neknam Khan, and he says that if at all the governor Neknam Khan or the Arcot Nawab is given a free reign over his subjects, then the East India Company is bound to lose its total and absolute control over the native inhabitants. So they didn't want that power to go back to the Nawabs, and they refused any local governors or any local officials to be appointed to sit on judgment over the native inhabitants. So the company then made agent of Madras the governor, who was invested with judicial powers to try all the other cases. And there was also a need for Supreme Court which was felt by that time. And so the Masters Council resolved that the Court of Judicature should be established for trial of civil and criminal cases by jury. And so they again showed this charter of 1661 to support the claims. And finally, the governor and the council were empowered to sit as Court of Judicature every Wednesday and Saturday in the chapel at Fort St. George. What you're seeing on your screens is the chapel, the St. Mary's Chapel. This is within the precincts of Fort St. George. This is said to be the oldest Anglican church to the east. It was this church probably was the only church which also functioned as a court. So from 1680, this church was functioning as a seat of judiciary. The justices of Choultry Court were then appointed to carry out the orders of this Court of Judicature, and usually the trials were held by a jury of 12 men. There was also a clerk and an officer to support the people in this Court of Judicature. The small causes and petty offences were again dealt with by the Choultry Court. So the first case that came to the Court of Judicature was on 10th April 1678. This was a case between 2 Britishers, again John Tivell and William Jersey, and it was heard in this very same chapel. Next picture, please. This is a recent picture of the chapel that I took probably last year. Next picture, please. The insides of this chapel. Next picture, please. Yeah, the vaulted ceiling. If you look at the ceiling, you know, this St. Mary's Church within the fort, which functioned as the first court of Madras, this has beautiful ceiling. The ceiling was designed in such a way that the bombings or the shellings will not, will not disturb the church and its inhabitants. And it is also said that during the French siege of Madras, this church held sway, and it was one major part which the French were afraid to attack because it was a church, and lot of Britishers escaped by being saved when they sought refuge inside this church. And it also withstood the First World War and the Second World War, luckily. The Court of Admiralty, that was another court that was also set up for interlopers or agents. And because there was a delay in a judge advocate coming all the way from England, the Court of Judicature also sat trial on murders and other problems. And on 10th July 1686, the Court of Admiralty started functioning. There was one person by name John Gray who acted as its first judge. And the Mayor's Court, next picture please, can you go to the next picture? Yeah, this is a beautiful ribbon building. It was built in the 1920s, which now houses the Corporation of Madras. And the Mayor's Court, the Madras Corporation, as you all know, this is the oldest municipal body of the Commonwealth of Nations outside Great Britain. This was again established with the charter of King James II in 1687, the oldest corporation of the country. It was set up on 29 September 1688. And this mayor, the mayor of this Madras Corporation, he was also functioning as a Madras Mayor's Court. They also had 10 aldermen to attend to the court proceedings, and most of the aldermen were people of other origin, from other countries like Armenians, Jewish people have been the aldermen. And Sir John Biggs is said to be the first recorder of this Mayor's Court. So in 1726, this Mayor's Court, again, it was transformed to a court of record, again with a charter from King George II. And the Court of Judicature was then made as an appeals court and a court of sessions. So at a point of time, we find three different courts were functioning in the town. So one was a court of judicature, which was presided by a judge advocate. The other one was a mayor's court, which was presided over by the mayor of the city. The other one was the Choultry Court, which was presided over by 2 aldermen. And there was also this Court of Admiralty, which dealt with the interlopers. You find 4 different courts functioning within a city at a given point of time, and it was getting too confusing. And finally, in 1726, the East India Company, they abolished the Court of Judicature. And the Mayor's Court was re-established in the year 1753 after the French invasion and the handing over. And probably somewhere in the 1790s, the Recorder's Court was established in Madras, just like the other cities like Calcutta, and the mayor's powers were also reduced. And for the native inhabitants, the courts were held usually in the Blacktown area. Can we go to the next picture, please? This is the town hall, the Victoria Hall, which was built in 1886. This is bang next to the central station. You can see this even now. So this, one second, sorry. Yeah, so this is the Victoria Public Hall, and this was also functioning as a town hall. And there were cases that were also being heard in this town hall. Next picture, please. This is a beautiful illustration of the Black Town of Madras. So this is what the Black Town initially looked like. The area that you now call Paris Corner, the Georgetown area, or Paris simply now. This looked like this about 200 years ago. And there were separate courts functioning here. Next picture, please. Yeah, this is Frederick Fiebig's picture, 1881, I think. This is also pictures of the Blacktown area. And so this Black Town had their own courts, the Choultry Courts, and there were severe sentences that were given to the local inhabitants. You know, if a Britisher could commit a murder and get away easily with it, if an Indian committed even a small pillory, he would have his ear cut off. So they had severe punishments for the local inhabitants, because the Britishers believed that the native inhabitants were a difficult lot to rule over. Next picture, please. Yes. So the Recorder's Court was finally merged into the Supreme Court of Judicature on 4th September 1801. The illustration that you're seeing there is of Sir Thomas Strange. Sir Thomas Strange was the first Chief Justice of Madras Supreme Court. He was a recorder of the Records Court, and he was immediately made the Chief Justice of Madras Supreme Court when it was set up in the year 1801. So the Supreme Court, which initially functioned in Fort St. George, then moved to a place called Marine Yard in the year 1817. Next picture. This is the Customs House. What you're seeing here is the Customs House. Most of the place now, you know, it has become part of the Madras Harbour. There are a few remnants of this Customs House that you can even now see, which is near to the Madras Beach railway station. So in 1817, the Supreme Court moved to a building which was next to this Custom House, and there was a regulation in the year 1802 which set up Zilla courts for civil suits. provincial courts for appeals, and Sadar Adalat, or a chief court of civil judicature, to hear appeals from the provisional courts. And there was also this court of circuit for criminal cases, which was abolished in 1843. And there was a Faujdari Adalat, which was set up, which they called the chief criminal courts, to hear into those cases. And both the Sadar Adalat and the Faujdari Adalat, whatever cases they saw, whatever cases had their appeals, they again went to the Supreme Court of Madras. And in 1862, the Sadar and the Faujdari Adalats were merged to form the High Court of Madras, or the High Court of Judicature, which has been functioning as a court of law. The Indian High Courts Act, part of the Indian High Courts Act, and a letters patent from Queen Victoria dated 26 June 1862, they paved the way for the formation of Madras High Court. Actually, 3 high courts were formed at the same time, one at Madras, one at Calcutta, and one at Bombay. And on 15th August 1862, Madras High Court was formally declared open. 15 August, again, the date, that's very interesting, right? So in 1862, we started our Madras High Court, and in 1888, the construction of High Court buildings started, because till then it was functioning at this customs house, at a block next to the customs house. Next picture, please. So this is a beautiful Madras High Court buildings, wonderful Indo-Saracenic architecture building, constructed in 1888, completed in 1892. This was designed by a person called J.W. Brassington, who was then the consulting architect to the government of Madras, and it was also later redesigned by architect Henry Irwin, and it was completed by Irwin basically. Indo-Saracenic is this typical style of architecture, which is half Mughal and half British Baroque style, and you can find huge arches, large onion-shaped domes, well-ventilated windows, large windows, jalis. No, the work is tremendous. I think you all should visit this High Court premises, once in a while, and soak in its beauty actually. And this has 11 court halls. And in the year 1892, when this was completed, the total expenditure in constructing it came to around 12,98,163 rupees. With a cost of 12 lakh, this court was built. And you can see at the middle of the picture a tall pillar, right? We call this the main tower of the building, which is 142 feet high, and this functioned initially as a lighthouse. The topmost portion of this lighthouse, this this dome, this was used as a lighthouse in 1892 when the High Court was initially built to guide the ships. Next picture, please. Yeah, this is an old picture of Madras High Court. There you can see another pillar-like structure next to the main, the main pillar. Next picture. Yes, this is a picture of this. We call this the Doric column lighthouse. So this lighthouse is also within the High Court premises. So the High Court probably is the only court premises that has 2 lighthouses that were functioning from its premises. So this standalone lighthouse also functioned for more than 3 decades as a lighthouse of the city within the court campus. And on 12th July 1892, Baron Wenlock, who was then the governor of Madras, he handed over the key of the court to Arthur Collins, who was then the Chief Justice of Madras High Court. There were a lot of Indians who worked in the High Court, right from Justice T. Muthuswami Iyer, who was the first Indian judge of High Court. We have other Indian judges like Justices Krishnaswamy Iyer and Sundaram Iyer. And they were exemplary advocates who came and who worked with the Madras High Court. Next picture, please. So this is a wonderful speech that was given by Chief Justice Arthur Collins when he received the key of High Court from Baron Wenlock. I think this will be a very beautiful passage that I'd love to quote what he had spoke that day. My lord, so long as this High Court is an independent court with judges who fear no man and who administer the law according to the rules of law, equity and good conscience. With the jurisdiction it has exercised for so many years intact, I believe it will continue to have and to deserve the confidence of the public. This confidence of the public is something that's really very important, that any person who is reading law now should, put in their mind. In conclusion, I fervently hope that long after you and I, Your Excellency, have passed away to that undiscovered country of which we know so little, there may always continue to be found men of ability and courage who will administer the law in these courts without distinction of class, creed, or race. How true and how moving. 1892, someone has said this. And even after more than 120 or 30 years of this, we still stand at the same place fervently wishing that our courts will deliver justice without distinction of class, creed, or race. Next picture, please. So the High Court of Madras was bombarded by the German cruiser SS Emden on 22nd September 1914. Right at the judge's entry of the Madras High Court, you can find this tiny plaque which says, during the bombardment of Madras by the German cruiser Emden on the night of 22nd September 1914, a shell struck the spot and carried away a portion of the compound wall. Now, this is a beautiful memory, like actually a German ship attacking a part of the High Court, and no one died there, luckily. But this plaque is a memory, a beautiful memory that I think almost all the Madras people cherish. Next picture, please. So this is one portion of Madras High Court that anyone who enters the court into will be seeing. This sculpture that you see here is very interesting sculpture of a character called Manunidi Cholan. We never knew or know if this character is for real or if it is some kind of cooked character. But the thing is, Manunidi Cholan's story has been immortalized in epics like Silapadikaram and even in Periya Puranam. And it is said that the Cholas of Puhar, the Chola kings who ruled over a place called Puhar, we have a segment called Valakuru Kadai in the epic Silapadikaram, where Kannagi, the protagonist, she comes and she asks for justice from the Pandya king. She is boasting about the Chola king and his sense of justice. The story so goes that there is a legend that the king, he hung a giant bell in front of his courtroom for anyone who needs justice to ring. And one day it so happened that he came out on hearing the ringing of a bell by a cow. You can see a cow there. And upon inquiry, the king finds that the calf of the cow had been killed under the wheels of his son's chariot. In order to provide justice to the cow, Ellalan, that's the king's name, he killed his own son, Veedi Vidangan, under the chariot as his own punishment. Like Ellalan wanted himself to suffer and realize how the cow suffered on losing its calf. And so he killed his own son, trampling him under his own chariot. And impressed by the sense of justice of this King Ellalan, Lord Shiva came, he appeared, he blessed him, and he brought back the calf and his son back to life. And this legend has been mentioned in Silapadikaram and in Periya Puranam also. Of course, the Tamil land has this long tradition of upholding justice by the kings for over a long period of time, right from the Sangam age. Silapadikaram, we normally fix it to the Sangam age. So for more than 2000 years, we have been upholding justice in this land. And we hope that with a lot of people like you, fresh, young blood, people like you, we hope that justice will be delivered irrespective of caste, religion, or creed to everybody in this country with equity and equality. Thank you so much. We come to the end of this presentation. I don't know if I have done justice to the topic, but I think I have said whatever I knew about the High Court, its history, the city, and its history. I thank Nandita once again for the wonderful opportunity given to interact with all of you. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Any questions on the chat window or?
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, good evening.
Ma'am, it was wonderful. I mean, brilliant. I think you traced the history so well. I just had like a few questions. The picture that you showed of the Central Railway Station, is that the current where the current railway station, which is housed in Chennai right now? I mean,
yes.
Is it the same one?
The same station.
Same one, is it?
The same station. Yes.
Okay. And can you please repeat the name of the king that you mentioned in the last? Which Chola was he? I mean,
We call him Manunidi Cholan, but we don't have any references to Manunidi Cholan in any history. We don't have any inscriptions to his name. It is said that it is a legend. So I won't say it is history, it is legend.
Thank you, ma'am. Especially the Arthur Collins reference that you just, quoted. It was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
I have a question. Sorry.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Ma'am, it was really wonderful that you explained the history of Chennai in a very lucid way.
Thank you so much.
My one small question was, you made a reference to the word Madrasapattinam.
Yes.
I think as far as my knowledge goes on history, the word was first found in the Vijayanagara era inscriptions like in the late 13th century. And that was the word which was later borrowed by the Britishers to name it Madrasapattinam. And hence the modern word of Madras then came into existence later. So was that a reference that it was also found in the Vijayanagara era inscriptions, and that was the word which was officially borrowed by the Britishers who wanted to name that small fishing village called Madras later? Is that
the Vijayanagara inscription that you are mentioning is basically the inscription of Kampanna Udayar. Kampanna Udayar, again, as we said, he was supposed to be the vassal of the Vijayanagara kings. And that is why we find the mention Madras and Pattinam there. And most of the port towns were named Pattinams. You can find mentions of Sopattinam, Durgaraya Pattinam, Machili Pattinam. So Pattinam is basically a living site near the port. So we find a lot of these Pattinams all along the coastal area. And so this Madrasan Pattanam, again, the name Madrasan Pattanam is also referred by the British in their land records. So apparently it is not a new name. They mentioned that it is a fishing hamlet. So Madrasan Pattanam has been there right from the Vijayanagara period. Yes.
Yeah, another like kind of story or a kind of deviation which I heard was that the word Madrasapattinam is a corrupted word of this Telugu community called Mudiraj. The Mudiraj, and then we became Mudiraj or something. Okay. And then it was derived and corrupted as Madras later. So is that
actually there are a lot of theories that went into this Madras name. There was also this reference that there was a family called the Madeiras, the Portuguese Madeira family, who were part of this church in Mylapore. So it is also said that they owned a large parcel of land, and so the name Madras came from Madeira. And there's also this mention that it came from Madarasan, who was a fisherman. There are a lot of such theories, but I think the best theory to go by with is this inscription, because we have this inscription and the name Madarasan Pattanam. It definitely says that during the Vijayanagara period there was a Pattanam or a port by name Madarasan Pattanam.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Just a few, information tidbits I know. You talk about the purchase of land, right, from the Vijayanagara kings, the Golconda, sub-vassals of Vijayanagara. The nature of the transaction which went into that was, how would you bifurcate the land, or how would you buy it? So what I read was they bought it by one cannonball shot, how much the distance of a cannonball was. That was the land they were taking from the Vijayanagara kings, and that's how Fort David came. And the transaction that was done by Yale at that time, who was in Madras City, who went to fund the Yale University abroad. Few other things is that you mentioned Henry Irwin, and Irwin is one of a very famous architects in India. You see his architecture all around. If you see the Madras High Court complex, I had the luck of visiting it last year, and if you see the the Mysore Palace, which is a boat construction of Irwin, basically Irwin removed the pathways, the long structures of the Madras High Court. And if you combine it together, if you remove the middle parts of the Madras High Court, the long corridors, and you combine together, what you basically get is the Mysore Palace. That's how Irwin's architecture in the Madras High Court went into the Mysore Palace, and that's a few of the things I've read about how it happened, and pretty much that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, but most of the Indo-Saracenic buildings were the same. If you visit the Madras Museum, if you look at the old Connemara complex, it will also have the same onion-shaped domes. It will be an exact replica of Madras High Court. So most of the Indo-Saracenic buildings, they had the same, the same kind of architecture. And Irwin was particularly very fond of the Belgian glasses that he kept on the ceilings. I think if you have visited the High Court, you would have seen the hall. with a lot of the colored Belgian glass on the ceiling, and you can find the light streaming in through it. It will be wonderful. Even the Connemara has the same design apparently. So Irwin was very fond of the same kind of architecture. And yes, I do agree with you. The Madras High Court, apparently it looks the Madras the Mysore Palace is exact replica of High Court minus the hallways. Yes, that's right.
I do not have any questions because there was so much to absorb from, and I'm not taking the liberty to ask you questions. But it was a fantabulous presentation, man. I wish we had such good mentors back in our schools. We probably would have been historians by now.
People wouldn't have been scared of history, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was a fantastic, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nivedita. I think there are no further questions, but this has been a great session. I mean, some of us here in the faculty practiced in the Madras High Court. I personally did for about 6 years of my career, and it is a building that evokes a lot of awe and inspiration. And of course, like my former senior, Mr. Datar, used to say, when his father, asked him, why do you not take up a profession as a cost and works accountant? Apparently, he told his dad, there is this big red building, and even if I'm begging, I will beg in that building.
That's so beautiful.
Has a lot of course, later, many years later, when I started my career, I did feel that there were people inside the building who were not probably giving the right kind of justice, but that's a story for a different day. And like you said, I hope that, the young people who take up profession today keep everything that was stated in those majestic words, right? That, and I think that really is what that building really teaches us. I mean, it's really a building with a lot of spirit. Thank you once again on behalf of the cohort. We are extremely grateful for you, to you for taking time out and presenting the whole history of not only the Madras High Court, but the whole story of how we came to this point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the wonderful opportunity. Thank you.